Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, our praises, honor, and glory shall go to Yahweh, Ba'asham, Yahushai, Ba'asham, Makakodash, Brakatham. Double honor shall go to apostles, elders, and bishops, a great millstone, and continue to teach it to rule well. Shalom to the Akims, a great millstone of like-minded camps and individuals who continue to teach as one body, who continue to be out on the highways and byways, risking their lives for the greater good. Shalom to sincere Aquats who continuously learning in silence as the Holy Scriptures have commanded for you to do so. And also shalom to the true believers and subscribers of this true gospel, for this should be considered a true blessing from the higher power. This is Azariah Gabar, representing the King is Coming channel, back at it with another lesson for edification purposes. All right, Jakes. So this is going to be yet another installation of the third woe. But in this video that I'm going to play, Abaratazar, Lord willing, this is a history lesson. All right? As far as the past woes, all right, that had taken place. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you Jakes have heard by now about the great segregation in the military back in those days where, you know, Jakes had to use separate restroom facilities, separate living quarters, separate dining quarters, and even separate training on the field training facilities. Okay? So the main title for this video is Same Military, Different America. But the subtitle for this video you see on the screen is How the GI Bill Built the Middle Class and Left 1.2 million black veterans behind. And trust you me, I'm not shocked. One iota. You heard? Because let's face it, even up to this very day, when Jakes sign up for the military, they feel that they're going to finally get their props from Esau Edom. Please, stop kidding yourselves. All right? So the title for my video today will be Black Patriotism. I repeat, Black Patriotism. So this video is about 15 minutes long, so I'll play it in its entirety and then pull up a couple of precepts like I usually do and then call it a day. All right, so without further delay, let's rock.
How 7.8 million veterans used the GI Bill to go to college. Millions more bought their first homes. Entire suburbs were built for veterans. Middle-class wealth exploded. The GI Bill turned working-class soldiers into homeowners, college graduates, and professionals. But here's what they don't teach you. The GI Bill was deliberately designed to exclude black veterans. Not officially. The law itself didn't mention race. But the way it was administered made it nearly impossible for black veterans to access the same benefits as white veterans. Black soldiers fought in World War II. They stormed beaches. They liberated concentration camps. They bled and died for their country. And when they came home, America told them, "You don't get the benefits." This isn't speculation. This is documented history, and the effects are still with us today. The wealth gap between white and black Americans. A huge part of it traces back to the GI Bill. This is American erased. This is how the government built the middle class and left black veterans behind.
Let this small device sit in your home to generate clean, free energy and never worry about power bills again. Homeowners are powering their homes
The GI Bill was signed into law by President Franklin D. Roosevelt on June 22, 1944. It was designed by the American Legion and championed by politicians who feared another Great Depression after the war ended. World War I veterans had struggled to reintegrate into society, and many ended up unemployed and homeless. The government didn't want that to happen again. So the GI Bill offered four major benefits. 1. Education and training. If veterans could attend college or vocational school for free, the government paid tuition, fees, books, and a living stipend. This was revolutionary. Before the GI Bill, college was for the wealthy. After the GI Bill, millions of working-class veterans became the first in their families to earn a degree. 2. Home loans. Veterans could get low-interest, zero-down payment mortgages guaranteed by the federal government. Banks couldn't refuse them. This allowed veterans to buy homes in newly built suburbs. Home ownership became the pathway to middle-class wealth. 3. Unemployment benefits. Veterans received $20 per week for up to 52 weeks while they looked for work. This gave them financial stability during the transition from military to civilian life. 4. Business loans. Veterans could get loans to start businesses. This created a generation of small business owners. On paper, the GI Bill was available to all veterans. It didn't explicitly exclude anyone based on race. But in practice, it was administered in ways that made it nearly impossible for black veterans to access the same benefits as white veterans. And I will tell you how it all happened. The GI Bill offered free college tuition. But in 1945, most colleges and universities didn't accept black students, especially in the South. Southern states had Jim Crow laws that enforced segregation. Black students couldn't attend white universities, and the historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs, didn't have the capacity to absorb hundreds of thousands of black veterans. Let's look at the numbers. In 1946, there were over 1 million black veterans eligible for GI Bill education benefits, but HBCUs could only accommodate around 70,000 students total. That left over 900,000 black veterans with nowhere to go. Some northern and western universities accepted black students, but there were quotas and restrictions. Even universities that technically admitted black students often had segregated housing, limited slots, and hostile environments. The result? By 1947, only 12,000 black veterans, out of over 1 million eligible, were enrolled in college using the GI Bill. Meanwhile, over 1.2 million white veterans were in college. Black veterans who wanted to use their GI Bill education benefits often had to settle for vocational training instead of 4-year degrees. They learned trades, welding, carpentry, mechanics, which paid less than professional jobs that required college degrees. And even vocational schools discriminated. Many refused to accept black students. The Veterans Administration, which oversaw the GI Bill, did nothing to enforce equal access. The federal government knew this was happening. They just didn't care. The GI Bill created a generation of college-educated white Americans. It didn't do the same for black veterans.
They thanked us for our service, then told us where we couldn't eat, where we couldn't live. It hurts, you know?
The GI Bill offered low-interest, zero-down payment home loans. This was supposed to be the great equalizer, home ownership for everyone. But in practice, it worked very differently for black veterans. Here's how the housing exclusion worked. 1. Banks could refuse loans. The GI Bill guaranteed home loans, but banks still had to approve them. And banks routinely denied loans to black veterans. They used racist criteria like neighborhood stability and property values to justify the denials. In practice, this meant we don't lend to black people. The federal government knew this was happening. They did nothing. 2. The Federal Housing Administration enforced segregation. The Federal Housing Administration, the FHA, backed most of the mortgages issued under the GI Bill. But the FHA had a policy. They would only insure mortgages in racially homogeneous neighborhoods. This meant that if a black family tried to buy a home in a white neighborhood, the FHA wouldn't insure the loan. And if a white family tried to buy a home in a black neighborhood, the FHA wouldn't insure that either. The FHA explicitly designed its policies to keep neighborhoods segregated. The FHA published maps of every major city in the United States with neighborhoods color-coded by risk. Green neighborhoods were safe for investment. These were white, middle-class areas. Red neighborhoods were hazardous. These were black neighborhoods. This is where the term redlining comes from, as banks used these maps to decide who got loans. If you were black and tried to buy a home in a red neighborhood, banks wouldn't lend to you. And if you tried to buy a home in a green neighborhood, banks wouldn't lend to you either, because you were black. The result? Between 1944 and 1952, the federal government backed millions of home loans. Less than 2% went to non-white borrowers. Less than 2%. 3. Restrictive covenants. Even if a black veteran somehow got a loan, many neighborhoods had restrictive covenants, clauses in property deeds that prohibited selling homes to black people, Jews, and other minorities. These covenants were legal until 1948, and even after they were ruled unconstitutional, they were still enforced informally. The new suburbs being built for veterans, Levittown, for example, explicitly refused to sell homes to black families. Levittown, one of the most famous post-war suburbs, had over 17,000 homes. Not a single one was sold to a black family until the 1960s. So black veterans came home from the war, tried to use their GI Bill benefits to buy a home, and were denied. Not because they didn't qualify, but because the government and banks conspired to keep them out. White veterans bought homes. Those homes appreciated in value. They built wealth. They passed that wealth to their children. Black veterans rented. They built no wealth, and their children inherited nothing.
I've been a pastor for over 20 years. This is a very important
So?
message that I urge every American to pay close attention to.
Shut up.
especially-
The wealth gap. Let's talk about what this meant in real terms. Home ownership is the primary way American families build wealth. When you own a home, it appreciates in value. You build equity. You can borrow against it. You can pass it to your children. Home ownership is generational wealth. After World War II, white veterans used the GI Bill to buy homes in the suburbs. In 1940, the home ownership rate for white families was about 45%. By 1960, it was over 60%. That's a massive increase, driven almost entirely by the GI Bill. Black home ownership rates barely moved. In 1940, about 23% of black families owned homes. By 1960, it was 38%, still far behind white families. And the homes black families did own were in redlined neighborhoods, which meant they didn't appreciate in value the same way. A white family buying a home in Levittown in 1950 for $8,000 would see that home worth $100,000 or more by the 1990s. A black family buying a home in a redlined neighborhood saw little to no appreciation. Here's a concrete example. In 1947, a white veteran named Bob bought a home in a suburb outside New York City for $8,000 using his GI Bill benefits. By 1970, that home was worth $30,000. By 2000, it was worth $200,000. Bob passed that home and that wealth to his children. In 1947, a black veteran named James tried to buy a home in the same suburb. He was denied. He rented instead. By 1970, he had no equity. By 2000, he had no wealth to pass to his children. That's the wealth gap. And it started with the GI Bill. Today, the median white family has about 10 times the wealth of the median black family. A significant portion of that gap traces directly back to the GI Bill and the housing policies that excluded black veterans. Oh, and it's not just in housing alone. The education exclusion had long-term effects too. College graduates earn more money over their lifetimes. They get better jobs. They move into professional fields. Their children are more likely to go to college. White veterans use the GI Bill to go to college. They became doctors, lawyers, engineers, teachers, business owners. They entered the middle class. Their children went to college. Their grandchildren went to college. The GI Bill created generational upward mobility. Black veterans, denied access to college, ended up in lower paying jobs. They worked in trades, in factories, in service industries. Their children had less access to education. The cycle continued. By 1950, over 2 million white veterans had attended college using the GI Bill. Fewer than 100,000 black veterans had. That's a staggering disparity, and it created an educational gap that persists today. I know you may want to ask why nobody did anything about this unjust discrimination. Well, the Veterans Administration, the federal agency overseeing the GI Bill, was fully aware that black veterans were being denied benefits. They received thousands of complaints. Civil rights organizations like the NAACP documented the discrimination and sent reports to Congress. The VA did nothing. They claimed they had no authority to force banks to lend to black veterans. They claimed they couldn't force universities to admit black students. They claimed their hands were tied. But that's a lie. The VA had enormous power. They controlled the money. They could have required banks and universities to serve all veterans equally as a condition of receiving federal funds. They could have investigated discriminatory practices. They could have enforced the law. They chose not to. Why? Because Southern Democrats in Congress had power, and they made it clear if the GI Bill integrated housing or education, they would kill the bill. So the compromise was pass the GI Bill, but let states and local institutions administer it. That gave Southern states the power to discriminate. The GI Bill was deliberately designed to be administered in a way that allowed discrimination. It wasn't an accident. It was a choice.
It's getting worse by the day.
Told you the city don't care about us.
We just gotta make do with what
The effects of the GI Bill's racial exclusion are still with us today. The wealth gap, the home ownership gap, the educational gap, all of them trace back, at least in part, to the GI Bill. White families who benefited from the GI Bill passed their wealth to the next generation. They sent their kids to college. They helped them buy homes. They built financial stability. Black families who were excluded from the GI Bill had nothing to pass on. They couldn't help their children buy homes. They couldn't afford to send their kids to college. They started generations behind. And that's still true today. The median white family has about $171,000 in wealth. The median black family has about $17,000. That's a 10-to-1 ratio. And a significant part of that gap comes from the GI Bill. Studies estimate that the exclusion of black veterans from GI Bill housing benefits alone cost black families trillions of dollars in lost wealth. Trillions. That's wealth that was never built, never passed down, never invested. The GI Bill was one of the most successful government programs in American history. It built the middle class. It created prosperity. It lifted millions of families out of poverty. But it only did that for white families. Don't forget to subscribe. I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Wealth exploded. The GI Bill turned working class soldiers into homeowners.
All right.
Here's an answer from Wikipedia.
I get the message, okay? So, this is going to be a simple video, all right? So, you heard what that narrator said. This was done by design for the Jakes out there. So, why was this done by design? The book of Ezekiel 35:2, and it reads, Son of man, set thy face against Mount Seir, Mount Esau Edom, and prophesy against it. Verse 3, and say unto it, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Behold, O Mount Seir, I am against thee, and I will stretch out my hand against thee, and I will make thee most desolate. Verse 4, I will lay thy cities waste, and thou shalt be desolate. And of course, this is a future prophecy. That's what's about to take place very soon here. And thou shalt know that I am the Lord. Here's a point, verse 5. And I've read these scriptures in Ezekiel multiple times, but again, they have to be brought up. All right? And it reads, because thou hast had a perpetual or forever hatred, and has shed the blood of the children of Yasharallah by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity, in the time that their iniquity had an end. Woo! So when will this iniquity have an end? Well, according to the book of 2nd Esdras 6 and 9, it reads, Esau is the end of the world, which is happening right now in real time. And Jacob is the world, or Jacob is which follow it. You know, I'm chopping it up, but you know what I'm saying? I'm just roughly paraphrasing. Esau is the end of this world, but Jacob is of it which followeth. Okay? There you go. All right? So this is why this GI Bill shenanigan took place back then, because of Esau's perpetual or everlasting hatred towards you Jakes. Now here's a double whammy for you Jakes that are hell-bent on joining the military and be a defender of Babylon. And it reads in Proverbs 11 and 21, though hand join in hand, the wicked shall not be unpunished, but the seed of the righteous shall be delivered. Booyakah. So you Jakes in this present day that's being sent out, shipped out for deployment to the Middle East, y'all not coming back. You know, us brothers, amongst us brothers, we got this terminology, and it talks about heading to the meat grinders, okay? That's where you Jakes are heading. To the meat grinders, whether it is by military deployment or you silly Jakes that's out there, you know, globetrotting out there, and now y'all stuck out there because those airports have been bombed, all right? So that's going to conclude this lesson for today, and hopefully, once again, this edification brought forth. So with that being said, all praises, honor, and the glory shall go to Yahweh, Ba'asham, Yahushai, Ba'asham, Makakodash, Brakatam, Kwam, Yasharal, Rise Israel. And as always, Abaratazah, Lord willing, on to the next video. Shalom.